It was around the 1980s, the mid-1980s, maybe the late 1980s, when this movie called Three Men and a Baby came out. And it had Steve Guttenberg, Ted Danson, and Tom Selleck. Tom Selleck with the mustache, Tom Selleck from Magnum. I mean, just Tom Selleck. He was the brilliant guy, right? So it was a funny movie, a great comedy. And it was about these three bachelors who were trying to adjust to life, and they had this baby suddenly placed on them, and they had to learn all of these hard lessons. Now, I remember inside the movie, there was one particular scene where one of the guys, one of the actors, is holding the baby and reading to the baby a pretty horrible story, right? And as he's reading the story, he's just reading it in a really nice voice. So he's saying, and then the murderer came around the corner with a big axe. And of course, one of his friends came along and said, what are you doing? And he said, well, it doesn't matter what you say to the baby. You just have to do it in a really nice voice. So years later, when I was married with Becky and we had kids and we had our two boys, I was thinking, could I do the same? And you're wondering now, did I do the same? In fact, today, as I'm sharing with you lessons I've learned the hard way, is this the lesson that I learned the hard way? No, you're safe. I didn't do it. I may have experimented for about 5 seconds, just as a funny joke in front of the family and the parents, but I did not do this ever to the boys. So they're safe, they're normal, they're fine, they're great. I didn't try this at all. However, it was kind of interesting, the idea that things were said, but actually behind it was actually something darker. In fact, when I was a kid, as a small child, I remember that one of the things that we did in the playground, and we loved to do this, was to play a particular game that involved us all holding hands and running around in a circle, and we would recite a nursery rhyme. The nursery rhyme went like this: ring-a-ring-a-roses, a pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall down. It was a great little song. People would sing it, and they would recite it over and over again. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but people have done some research into the origins of this, and there's a lot of debate about this, but some have suggested that the ring-a-ring-a-roses was actually the complexion that would happen on the skin because of the Great Plague from the 1600s. And then the posies stuff were actually all the herbs that they would hold to kind of like ward off the plague. And then a tissue was the sneezing and the coughing that took place as a result of this plague, right? And then we all fall down was death. So the kids were like, ring-a-ring-a-roses, pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall down. And it was actually about the Great Plague. It was about death. It was just this ghastly thing taking place. And so there's, of course, a big debate about, is it true, is it not? But it was an interesting idea about what was going on behind that. Could it be something darker, maybe behind there, inside there? Now, at the same time, around that period, when I was about 10 years old, I actually moved schools. I moved from East London all the way over to Berkshire, to a little village called Binfield. And where I grew up in East London had a pretty strong East London Cockney accent, and where I was in Binfield, in Berkshire, they didn't. My headmaster, when I met him the first time, I remember he came over to me and he spoke and he said, I think the phrase was, I'm going to have your guts for garters, right? He said, I'm going to take my guts and he's going to cut them up and he's going to turn them into garters, which is actually horrific if you think about how the imagery of all that, right? But it was just a phrase. Obviously, he didn't mean he was going to assassinate me and murder me and take my stomach out and turn it into garters, because that's really horrific and very inappropriate. But it was funny. Then he said to me that he would recommend that I would take elocution lessons. And I looked at him and thought, elocution lessons? I thought he said execution lessons. And I didn't understand what he meant by execution lessons, and I didn't want any execution lessons. In fact, I was just so excited about the way that I spoke, because the way I spoke was very quick and free and fluid, and we would cut all our words up and we would just enunciate with a kind of a rhythm. It was just beautiful, like, oh, all right, mate, you're lovely, lovely. It just went all the way. And that was the way it was back then. Now, at the same time, I had a great teacher. His name was Mr. Dunbar. You can't make these names up. But he was bright as ever. He was phenomenal. And he really loved me. I actually felt like this teacher understood me, he embraced me, and he took care of me. Now, I did get in trouble with this teacher, Mr. Dunbar, a lot. In fact, I remember writing lines nearly every week. I would have to like stay behind in one of my playtimes and have to write these lessons and these lines. And these lines were like things like, "I will not talk in class." I don't know where this came from, but apparently I would talk in class a lot. And I would not learn this lesson over and over again. I would just like, must not talk in class, must not talk in class. But I really wanted to get out and play, because in the playground was going to be fun. We were going to connect with all my friends, and it was going to be great. So one day I was out on the playground, 10 years old, and of course we were going to go play out there, and one of the games we were going to play was that nursery rhyme. Ring a ring of roses, pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall down. And everybody has to hold hands and run around in this circle. It's very, very merry, very, very jolly. It's just really, really fun. And I remember standing there, grabbing hands of this kid on my right side here, and I went to put my hand forward to grab the hand of this person on my left side. And the girl standing on my left side, she looked at me and she grabbed my hand, and then she let go of my hand. And she said, "Not doing this." And she said, "You're just a fatso." And I was like, "What?" And she just like let go of my hand and walked off. Now, I understood fat, but I didn't understand so. So I just thought, that's really weird. In fact, this was the very first time in my entire life, at 10 years old, that anybody had ever called me fat. I'd been called all sorts of names in Southeast London. I'd been called Packy and all sorts of other racist terms that people used to do in the 1970s and 1980s in London. And it was just like, I dealt with all that stuff. But this was like a new level for me. So I went home. I said to my mom, "Hey, I was playing this game and this girl called me fatso." And I said to her, "I don't know, what is that?" And my mom looked at me and she said, "Well, she called you a fat pig." And I was like, oh. It really hit me. It was a deep, wounding moment. And I was kind of taken aback by that for a long time. Really difficult. I didn't understand why she had to call me that, but more than that, I just didn't understand why it had to happen in front of everybody. And then it became like something that others started to do as well. It was a difficult, difficult time. A really hard lesson that I was going to begin to learn in that moment. There are lots of great stories in the Bible that teach us how to really truly be welcoming, and how to actually love people, and how to actually embrace people who maybe we don't like, maybe we don't agree with. I'm going to share with you, I'm just going to grab my Bible, I'm going to share with you just one of these stories. It's found in Genesis chapter 12. It's actually the first book of the Bible. I was going to say one of the earliest books. It's one of the first books. It is the first book in the Bible. Of the 66 books, this is Genesis, written by a guy called Moses, and he's telling the story of origins, story of beginnings. So everything inside this book of Genesis is always about, and then it began here, and it took us somewhere else over here. It's fantastic, great narratives. I love reading this book, love studying this book. So in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, it tells us about a new character, and his name is called Abram. God's having a conversation with a guy called Abram at this time. His name later on becomes Abraham, but at this point his name is just Abram. And it says this in chapter 12, verse 1. "Now the Lord God said to Abram, 'Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you.'" And he's like, all right, I've got to pack up, leave my entire family, and I've got to go off to a new land. And I will show you where this new land is. Abram's about to begin an epic journey. And God says to him, "I'm going to promise you 3 things. So Abram's like, this is great. 3 promises, and I'm going to go to this new land. I'm leaving where I am. I'm going to become an explorer. I'm going to become somebody amazing. Let's see what it says here. It says, "And I will make you a great nation." A great nation? Number one, he's like, a great nation, I accept. And then he says, I will bless you and make your name great. Number two, I'm going to make your name great. You will have so many Instagram followers, so many people on Twitter. I mean, it would just be phenomenal. You will have a social media following. It'll be incredible. It will make your name great. Abram's like, that's amazing. So that you will be a blessing. That's why you're going to have a great name. Abram's like, that's fine. I'm going to go conquer all the lands. I'm going to become a great nation, and my name will be great. I don't mind leaving to begin this journey. Then God says to him, just down here at the end of verse 3, he says, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. What? Abraham's like, whoa, hang on a second here. Look, I'm okay with you making me a great nation. I'm okay with you making me have a great name, but all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Couldn't we just say the families I pick? Couldn't it just be the people I like? I mean, can't we just welcome the people who are not so fat? I mean, wouldn't that be fine? I mean, I don't want to have to like play with everyone, and I'm going to have to be a blessing to everybody. And God says, this is why I bless you. I bless you so that you may be welcoming to everyone. And you will be a blessing on all the families. Not just those, but everybody on the entire planet. When my wife and I first got married, we were still undergraduate students, college, at university, and then and I was training undergraduate theology, training to become a pastor, and loved the idea of working with kids and with youth. And remember, I learnt this really hard lesson as a kid, what it is to not be welcomed, to be rejected, to not be appreciated, to be pushed aside. And many other things are taking place as a result of that. That was just complicated. So my wife and I decided that we would open up our flat, our apartment. And it was a small little apartment, and we would have all the youth come to our apartment on Friday nights, our flat on Friday nights, and we would just have them drop their shoes off outside, which made the outside of the apartment rather smelly, right? Because a lot of teenagers taking all their shoes off at the same time, it had a particular scent inside there. And then all these kids would come in, and they just bring like a fruit juice or something, and we would make some food, and we'd spend the evening Friday night together. Those were some of the most amazing moments and memories of my life. I mean, really, those kids, I love them all. I love them all still to this very day. It didn't matter whether they were fat or skinny, didn't matter what gender they were, didn't matter whether they were bright or whether they had difficulties, didn't matter what kind of gifts they had or gifts that they were missing in some area. It didn't matter whether they spoke English really well or whether they did speak English eloquently, whether they were from East London or whether they were from Binfield Village. These were our kids. And all I wanted to do is to say, you're welcome. You're welcome. I love you, and you're welcome. These kids today work for the United Nations, they're book editors and writers, they are peace negotiators, they've worked in North Korea, in the Middle East, and I mean just amazing, bright, amazing kids. And some of them married and have kids. I feel like I'm an adoptive grandparent, right? I love these kids to this very day. And I was privileged to be part of a little small portion of their life to be able to say that I could be welcoming, because I had learned something difficult about what it's like to be in a place where you're not welcomed. It's too easy when you have to let someone go, when you go through a breakup in a relationship, divorce, or just a breakup, when you have somebody you disagree with, when you see somebody who has a different political opinion to you, to not be welcoming to them. These are difficult times sometimes. But yet God says to us and encourages us that if we're going to be a people who live by a different code, a different value, that value of being welcoming is far, far stronger inside us. And it's only learned through the hard lessons of life. The hard lessons when you experience what it is to be on the other side. And I know what it's like to be on the other side. And I don't like to make others feel like they're on the other side. Do I make sure that everybody feels welcome? No. No. I fail at that too. What I try to do, though, is to repair those moments as best as I know how, to repair those bridges as best as I know how, and to make sure that I am welcoming as much as I know how. And what I encourage you to do today and this week ahead is just to think about how can you truly be welcoming. What lesson have you learned through a hard way that you can turn around so you can become welcoming as well? God bless you, look after you, and stay with you.